Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, not the least of which because it's my first in-person talk in literally in years, right? So when Bodong invited me and said, you know, do you want to do it virtually or in person? I was like, in person, yay! Because I love to give talks and see people, right? People nod and smile or look bored or confused, and that's very important to me. Also, I will say, from my deep history, we are right next to the building where I actually started my research career. The Institute for Child Development, I worked for a professor there before I got my PhD. I worked for her as a research assistant full-time, and we were working on a project with collaborative learning. And that's when I was like, I'm doing everything these grad students are doing, so why don't I become a grad student? And so I got my PhD from the University of Pittsburgh at the Learning Research Development Center, where I continued to study collaborative learning. And one of my most recent publications in that area is with Bodong for a handbook chapter that we wrote together. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And thank you, Bodong, for inviting me. So today, what we're going to talk about is got to move the slide forward. Hold on, I got it, maybe.
Okay, this first.
Oh, okay, thank you. Got it. Okay, good. All right, so basically what I'm going to try to do in the amount of time we have available, I'm going to give a very quick overview of what learning analytics is, because Bodong has told me not everybody is familiar with the field. I'm going to give you a probably equally brief summary of how we got started doing learning analytics at Michigan and what some of the things were that helped us be able to do the kind of work that we're doing there. I'm going to talk about learning analytics dashboards in general, and then I'm going to show you the dashboard that I've created with a really wonderful team at Michigan, and then hopefully circle back then to what's next for learning analytics. So about learning analytics. So the thing is, we've been doing educational research for a long time, right? I said I started over here, that was a long time ago. So we've been studying learning for a long time. So what's changed more recently? And I think there are really three things. The first is, this many years later, we know a lot more about learning and how it happens in the processes of learning. And there has been this explosion of online educational programs. Back when I was a grad student, we had to videotape everything, right? Or we were creating these little micro worlds, we called them, and we could collect data from how the students were interacting with the micro world. And it was really small and narrow and confined, right? Both for who you could put in front of your little micro world, and then the hours and hours of videotape data that you would have to deal with after the fact. With this explosion of online educational programs, we have whole new opportunities for collecting data, both at a level and a scale that simply wasn't available when I was starting my research. And then finally, we have these new forms of data that these platforms generate that leave what some people will call digital footprints behind from the learners. And we have those footprints that we can look at. And so those are some of the key things about that kind of started learning analytics. And I have to say that the work I was doing at Michigan, we weren't even calling it learning analytics. It was before we had the first learning analytics conference. And I think now we're on our 12th learning analytics conference. So I would say the field is about 12 years old. And here is the definition, sort of the official SOLAR approved definition, where SOLAR is the Society for Learning Analytics Research. And it has some key words in it that I think distinguish learning analytics from different kinds of analytics. So the measurement, collection, and analysis, that's pretty common to analytics, of data about learners, and the context, right? What system are they on? Why are they using the system, and so forth. So learners and context for the purposes of understanding and optimizing learning and the environments in which learning occurs. And this latter part is what's really important to me. It's why I really got into learning analytics research, because I wanted to have an impact, right? I wanted to be able to help more learners be successful. So, and learning analytics is at its heart an applied discipline, right? So when we think about where did it emerge from or what's going on, I think of it as really a synergy between a number of existing fields. So I would say learning sciences, but I wouldn't exclude educational psychology or sociology or social psychology or any of those. I just mean learning generally in terms of places where there's theory about learning and how learning happens. Data science, of course, is hot, right? It's great. To analyze the kind of data we have requires methodologies that I didn't learn in grad school, right? And the capacity to do very sophisticated analysis of this data is a real opportunity, I think, to deal with this kind of data that we have. And lastly is design, because I said that learning analytics is really concerned with application. And so there's a design element in application, right? You can't just build something and throw it at a user and assert that it's going to work. You need to think carefully about the design of the intervention and how it's responsive to the needs of the learners and the context of those learners. And so when I think about learning analytics and the work that I'm going to show you today, I try to have my work touch all of these areas. I don't claim to be an expert in all of these areas, but I like to bring people into my projects who have expertise in the areas that I don't necessarily know as well. So I've been saying for the last couple minutes about actionable research. I love this diagram that I got from one of my colleagues at University of Michigan, who's in the learning health sciences. He thinks about how we can improve the system of medical care and delivery. And it's this loop, right? So it starts with data, and you're generating data to create knowledge, right? We're collecting all this data to know more about how learning happens. Then we take that knowledge and we put it in practice. We implement something, an intervention, create a new system or whatever, but that generates more data about the practice, which then reinforms what we know about learning. And so there's this wonderful loop, I think, is what we're striving for in learning analytics work, of continuing to know more about what we're doing and how it's working and feeding that back into our theories about how learning happens. And this, for me, my older son drew this. I told Bodong my older son likes to draw comics. He created this one for me when I was said, Anders, I need a figure that shows like we're not about the industrial model of education. And so he drew this for me. This is the education factory, and you can see little kids come in small and they emerge taller with their mortar boards. This is how, I mean, this is like the factory model of education, right? And as much as we don't want to have this be what we think about it, especially in higher education, what are the facts? At the University of Michigan, we have 110 courses that have more than 200 students per course, some as large as 2,000. And when you take that, what seems like a small number of courses, but you ask how many students on my campus those courses affect, it's over a third of all the credit hours taught on my campus. How can you teach courses that large without some sort of factory model? But I think you can. We're not there yet, but that's what I'm hoping to help with my research and learning analytics research in general. So how have we been doing this at Michigan? The first and foremost thing that had to happen first, and it wasn't because of what we were doing, thankfully, it was just something my university IT department decided to do, is they integrated a student data warehouse. So that we took, when I first started doing this research, I had to go knock on doors all over campus. Knock on the registrar's door. Can I have your data? Knock on IT's door. Can I have the LMS data, the learning management system data? Not, I was knocking on people's door, and eventually all of it lives in one place, and it lives on my campus. And one of the real advantages of being at Michigan in the time and place when I started doing this work is we were using a homegrown learning management system that then became a system called Sakai. And our learning management system lived on our campus. We were collecting our own data. We didn't have to contract with the company. We didn't have to negotiate access. It was on our campus. And because of these things, there were different faculty members like myself who thought, there's some really cool things we can do now, right? And so it kind of grew up from the bottom, from the faculty up further to eventually to the provost level of the university, where we then got support to be a little bit more broad in terms of, we hosted a symposium. And that, we ran that, I don't know, once or twice a month. People came from all over campus. It was like they found a place to meet and talk with each other about things that they were doing. The provost gave us money, and we had this learning analytics task force. And one of the ways we grew some more faculty projects is the task force gave small research grants to pilot some ideas on campus. And we have now an Office of Academic Innovation. I think, Bodang, you said you have one similar here at Minnesota. It's called something else. Center for Educational Innovation. I don't know what they do, but the creation of these systems have signaled, at least in higher education, the importance of thinking about the data that we're collecting and how we can use it. Michigan also started a new Institute for Data Science called MyLA, and the provost who gave them the money said, one of your projects has to be learning analytics. Yay! We were very lucky. And also we've, at Michigan for a couple of years, we hosted the Learning Analytics Summer Institute that SOLA runs. So it was over a period of time, but there are all these factors. Another couple points that aren't on here is we have a very well-educated, up-to-date, modern IRB group who understands that what student privacy is about and how we can protect student privacy doing this kind of research. And the other thing that we have is Michigan's Office of General Counsel, right? The lawyers who work for the university are not risk averse. And so we've been talking with them at the very beginning, like, are we violating FERPA? Is this going to be okay? Are we going to get sued for doing this? And the lawyers who work for Michigan said, no, this is not a violation of FERPA. Do it these, follow these procedures, do these kind of ethical things, respect student privacy. Someone may try to litigate against us and claim it's FERPA, but we feel we're legally in the clear on that, so they can take us on if they want, but we'll win. Not every legal counsel at every university is willing to take that risk. So there was this kind of all these various factors involved at Michigan that really were very, very helpful in supporting the kind of research that I've been doing and my colleagues at Michigan have been doing. And when we think about why we're doing this in terms of our campus, we wanted to provide this integrated student data ecosystem, right? Because that allows us access to all the kinds of data that we need, that we think can help us understand what contributes to student success and how we can improve it. We wanted to create a unique test bed for investigating student learning. And we wanted to demonstrate the value and the scalability of existing and future high value applications. So many things are really small applications that remind me of back in the day of these micro worlds that we were doing, right? So somebody builds something and tests it with a few classes and maybe only one class, but we wanted to show what the value was to the institution and to the scholarly literature for building and testing applications and thinking about how they can scale, and at the same time protecting student privacy while maximizing the usefulness of the data. This has always been at the forefront. One of my early assignments when I was doing this is I got sent to be a representative on the privacy committee for the whole campus. And they were evaluating things like, now that all our parking lots were gated and collected information about who is coming in and out of the gate, could supervisors of employees at the University of Michigan, could they have access to those logs so they could know when their employees were there and when they pulled in and when they didn't? So they were asking questions of very, very broad privacy questions, but there were privacy questions that my group was wondering about. So for example, a professor might contact us and say, the student said they turned something in, I can't find it. Can you tell me if they turned it in? Well, that's a good idea, right? Because if the student turned it in and the instructor can't find it, we want to help them find it. That's not a violation of privacy. On the other hand, I had occasionally a parent would say, I know my students in these course sites, and I want to make sure that they turn their assignments in on time. Can you add me to the course site so I know when things are due and I can contact my student and make sure that they're turning things in? No, I can't do that. Their students are over 18. That would be a violation of FERPA, right? Not to mention, as a parent, I think a very, very bad idea. But so there are all these questions in the air, and we needed to think about that. Michigan now has, sorry, I don't have the website here, but we have created a set of procedures and standards for learning analytics research at Michigan that respects privacy. And I can give you pointers to that later if you're interested. Okay, so that's the big picture background of learning analytics. It's the slice from Michigan. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my own research. And you might be saying, okay, so why are you doing student dashboards? Why? What interests you? How did that happen? Dashboards, well, for starters, one of my early projects in the lab, we created a dashboard for academic advisors. We were asked by academic advisors to do this. And at the time when we created it, and it's still being used on our campus, people who we showed it to who weren't academic advisors said, wow, this is really great. Why don't you show this to students? And at the time we created it, we said, well, I don't know. I don't know about showing this data to students. And now things have progressed enough that if we're not showing it to students, somebody else is going to be. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. But in ed tech, we've been showing students feedback for a long time, right? As long as there's been ed tech around, and things like cognitive tutors and homework assessments and even open educational resources are often providing students with feedback. But what's the difference in what we're doing, I think, with dashboards? Those more traditional ones tend to focus on correct answers. If you think about Khan Academy, the student does a program, gets feedback, it's correct or not, maybe gets a prompt or a different thing. But with the dashboard, what you're doing is you're giving your student feedback about performance and hopefully something about processes of learning. Traditional systems tend to be simple, static, right? You submit the answer, you get the feedback. You submit the answer, you get the feedback. Whereas dashboards are more complex, they can be more interactive, and they're richer, I think, displays that help students think about what they're learning. Typical feedback systems often only provide the information to the student after they finish a problem or after they finish a quiz, whereas dashboards can be on and available on demand. Student can go to the dashboard and check something, monitor something, and find some out information whenever they feel they need it, right? Traditional feedback tends to use normative standards. Somebody's decided what's, the best path through this learning progression. But in dashboards, you can personalize that pathway, and students can think about how is my performance relative to other students like me, for example. And also these other feedback mechanisms, typically it's the computer that's in control. The computer decides, is that a right answer? Is that a good answer? Should you proceed to the next assignment? Should you proceed to the next quiz? And in dashboards, the point is to give the information to students and give the agency to them to decide what to do next. And so with that in mind, you can think about dashboards as one of the earliest applications of learning analytics. And back even in 2011, there were some dashboards, some that got more press than others. I don't know how many of you have heard of course signals at Purdue. Remember the stoplight, red, yellow, green, and Purdue was in the press a lot for the system that they were providing to faculty members that told faculty members whether the students were in academic trouble or teetering close to academic trouble or doing well in the course, and then the instructor could send that student a message. So there have been various systems. Purdue's was scaled across campus, but most of the others maybe not so much. I think the Check My Activity was also a broader one, but a lot of the early applications in learning analytics are very specific systems that were not scaled broadly. But where are we today? Most learning management systems have some kind of dashboard, and more they have student dashboards. So it's not time to just sort of think maybe it's not a good idea to show these students their data, but now we need to find out if it's a good idea, how we should show it to them to make it be a good idea. And so that's where I come to thinking, okay, it's time to do this, because if we don't do it, the commercial vendors are going to do it, and I don't trust that they're going to get it right. So there are several assumptions that underlie most of these dashboards that you see. And one is that peer comparisons are helpful, or at least not harmful. Most of these systems norm the students to classmates, right? The students like me kind of idea. Most of them assume that we give the student these visualizations and they understand what they are and what they mean. And further, that students know what to do with them. These are all testable assumptions. And there are things that, that we hope to have some more answers to with our research. So I think there's a need for this research, and back to my question about why am I doing that? They're out there and we don't know enough about them. And it's very limited in terms of our existing research about how students interpret these visualizations and how they act as a result of them and how it affects them in various ways. So what is My Learning Analytics? That is the dashboard that we created. I'm going to show you in bigger view what each of those three views are. Our dashboard has three views. So we developed this by team at Michigan, and I was very, very intentional when I created this team. I didn't want to do this unless I had the expertise available that would help me to do it well, hopefully do it well. So myself from the School of Information and one of my other faculty colleagues whose expertise is data visualization, and a faculty member from the School of Education who knows something about student motivation and self-regulation, self-regulated learning. I wanted a solid theorist on my team, as well as my sense of theory as an information scientist. We had students, graduate students and undergraduates, because this is a student-facing dashboard, right? We need to have input from the potential users of the system. And then thankfully, blessedly, our IT teaching and learning team got clearance to spend a number of hours of their team to actually create the system. Because honestly, when we created the academic advisor dashboard, we did it in Excel, and it ran on a computer under one of my research assistant's desks. That's how it started. And then thankfully, when it was starting to be in demand, we passed it over to the Center for Academic Information, who had, professional software developers who basically retooled the whole thing so that it could scale up on campus. And I wanted to skip that first step, right? And so we have a really wonderful team in our information technology systems group who are really the software designers. And then we got interest from a couple of people at University of British Columbia who caught on early and said, hey, we have some ideas, can we help? We said, sure. So, so there's that. Now, when I started this research, there were not just coming out a couple of meta reviews of the existing dashboard. And here are several of the problems that they clearly identified. There's no theory. They're just building dashboards based on what they think they can give to students without a reason why. Often nobody did usability or accessibility testing. They just assumed they were good. And they have this one size fits all design. They're not designed to scale. They have these peer comparisons, but no real research about whether that's a good idea or not. Often they don't examine outcomes from use, which is a very difficult thing to do. We'll talk about that. And mostly they're very bespoke tools, they're very carefully constructed, usually in one researcher's head, like what's a good idea, and we'll roll it out. And they're not really going back to this idea about scale and utility. So these are problems that were identified that I thought, okay, if we're going to do this, we got to address some of these problems. I don't want to make some of the same mistakes. And so when we got started early in the project, we developed a number of design guidelines that we think oriented us to these problems. And you can see that there are 6 here. I have a paper that we published in a recent book about dashboards that is a bigger description of the design process and all the steps that we went through, and the usability testing and the accessibility testing and the brainstorming that we did and so forth. But basically what you can see here is those problems I gave you, we developed a design guideline that we thought addressed these problems. And you've had a chance to read them here so you can see what they say. And I'll note the last one, leverage Canvas, and what Canvas calls the unified data platform. So Canvas is our current learning management system. So we don't do our homegrown one anymore. Unison is a consortium of schools in which Minnesota is a member that got together, created a consortium, said we're all going to buy Canvas so we can be the single largest customer for Canvas. And we're going to create a data platform in the cloud that ingests every university's data in the same format, which opens the door for cross-institutional research. Like maybe how do students at Minnesota use MyLA versus how do students at Michigan use MyLA? So that for me, when I heard about that, I was like, oh, finally, the opportunity to be able to do cross-institutional research. So the IT team who got permission, if you will, to work with us said, well, you're going to do this because it helps us understand and provide a nice proof of concept for why this unified data platform is going to be important to our institution and the other Unison partners. So that one's a little bit more of a political guideline, but nevertheless a reality of some of the funding behind this. So where are we today? At Michigan, it's been used on over 120 courses. Over 10,000 students have been exposed to it. We'll get back to that in a minute. And some students have actually used it in 4 or more courses over time. So we have 6 full semesters of data. We have data on how they're using the tool, the MyLA data, and then survey data. And Unison is hosting MyLA for schools that didn't build it, like us, right? So 5 other schools, of which Minnesota is one. And the University of British Columbia is a test case. They are a Canvas campus, but they're not a Unison campus. So they have to make MyLA work directly on the Canvas data, because MyLA for us and for other Unison members pulls the data from this unified data platform. So it's a little trickier for them and other institutions who've asked us, hey, can we use Canvas can we use MyLA? And my first question is, are you on Canvas? And they say yes. They say, are you a Unison school? No. Okay, then you can have all the code, but you're going to have to figure out for yourself how to make your data work in MyLA, because we're not a service provider, right? We are to our campus, but certainly not the business that we're in. And we all agreed early on, we had no idea, no interest in commercializing this product. It's all open source. You can have it. I don't need to own it. I don't need you to pay me to use it. It's just not in our approach. So as you can see, we've both been theory driven when we think about MyLA, and we've been empirically driven. We wanted to develop a dashboard that gave us information that would feed back to theory. And we also wanted to be systematic about assessing the dashboard and thinking about who's using it and why, and what's the potential for impact on those students. So why should someone adopt MyLA, or why do we adopt it? The first is that Canvas doesn't have very much in the way of analytics for students. That's changed a little bit in the last year or so, but at the time we started the project, Canvas said, yes, we have an instructor-facing dashboard. It's coming out very soon, and in fact has come out a year or so ago, but they at the time had really no plans to give students data from Canvas, so we thought, great, good. And then we also really felt that supporting self-regulation was a really important goal to help students be better students, right? And how could we help with dashboard information? And the last thing is, this is another sort of more political thing, but reality, anybody, any instructor can use MyLA. They don't have to change your pedagogy. We knew it would never work, would never scale if we said to instructors, oh yeah, you can use this, but here you got to change this about the way you teach. Now, it doesn't work for all courses. Increasingly, there are some courses that are called gamified, right? It doesn't work very well for gamified courses, if you know what that means. And if you don't, we can talk about that later. And really, it relies on the instructor using the Canvas system for the grade book and the resources and all those other things. If they're using Canvas in that way, because the MyLA data all pulls Canvas data, right? Okay, so now let's get into the nitty gritty. What is MyLA all about? So how do they get there? You guys are Canvas, right? So you know on the home page, a toolbar comes up on the left, and it lists the home and assignments tool and the discussion tool and so forth. Well, this inserts My Learning Analytics as a tool in the toolbar. So that's one way. They can click directly on it and they get to the Learning Analytics homepage. But the other thing we thought a lot about when we were designing this was that it has to live where the students live. It can't be several other clicks beyond Canvas. So it's in the toolbar, one way to get there. And the other way to get there is if you are in, so this is our first view, the resources access view. If the student is in the resources tool, there's a little MyLA button. If they click on that button, it opens this view about resources. So the idea here is to help students figure out, am I keeping up? It's often hard for students, especially students who are struggling to know, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? So let me walk you through the different parts of this. So the first one is the slider on the top that says during this period of time, what were students looking at? It defaults to opening on the current week and 2 weeks back. But the student can adjust that. So say you want to study for the midterm that's coming up on week 8. It might open on week 8 and go back 7 and 6. But you want to know, have I read everything since week 1, right? So the top, those little circles in the blue line is a slider. You can adjust that. Obviously, you can't go ahead, right? Because no one's resourced anything ahead yet. So the student, there's a place where the student has agency in deciding, what do I want to see? Or maybe it's just a week. Maybe the student for this course was slammed last week on their other courses and know that they let this course slip. So maybe they just want to say, what was everybody doing in this course just last week? So I can make sure to catch up. There's a drop down that allows them to say different students. So say I'm a student, this is one of my gateway courses in my major, it's really important to me and I want to ace it. So I want to make sure I'm doing what the other students who are getting an A are doing. So you can adjust this to say, show me what students who currently have between 90 and 100% of the points are reading. Or maybe it's a course that you don't need the A in, it's an elective or it's not central and you know it's the course that you're maybe not going to pay as much attention to. You're like, I just need to get a B. Okay, so what are the students who currently have between 80 and 90%? Or maybe in the worst case, it's an elective that you just need to pass it. It's a distributional perhaps. And you're like, okay, I just need to get a C. So just tell me what the students are getting a C, and that's as low as it goes. But it lets the student decide what their own reference group is based on their motivation and goals for the course. The brush just also gives them a chance. It usually opens on the top 6 or 7 resources access. If they want to go further back, or you want to just say, just show me the top 3 things that people were doing last week, you can adjust that. And each of these bars, you see they're color coded. There's blue ones and gray ones. The blue ones are the ones the student has touched. They've opened that. And if they mouse over the blue line, it says like how many times they opened it, when's the last time they opened it, that kind of thing. Because sometimes students look at this and go, wait, what was that? Did I read that? Did I open that? I don't remember that. And so they go look. The gray bars are the ones they haven't looked. And what's kind of hard to read here is there numbers on the end of the bar that tells them what % of the students in the class have accessed that resource. So in the case of this student, there are 2 items there that are gray that 84% of their classmates have already read that they have not read. So it sort of flags for them, you know, hey, you missed this one, and they've read the one that everybody's read, so they're on track for that. Also, each of the names of the items is a direct link, and this will be important later. We wanted students to not have to keep toggling back and forth so much. So if they look at something and say, wait, what's that thing I haven't read? Oh my God, what is that? They click on the link and it opens it automatically, and they're right there. So those are the various aspects of this resources access view. We originally called it files access because it only gave files, but now students can also sort for files or videos, especially in the online semesters, right? Instructors are posting videos, and they can also say, just show me what videos people were watching, or I don't care about the darn videos, just show me what resources. And the resources could be things like readings, but they also could be things like practice quizzes, right? Is anybody doing the practice quiz? Should I have done the practice quiz by now? And as I said, yeah, you click on the file name to download the file automatically. Now, the thing that you'll note about this is all Canvas knows is if the student has clicked on it. I try to be careful not to say which resources the students have read or the students have viewed, because they could click on it and decide, yeah, I'm going to do that later and not actually read it, or they could click on it if it's a file and download it and read it later. So maybe their one click means they've accessed it, 20 times after that, versus the student who clicks on it 20 times because, they're looking at it in the moment, doing whatever, closing it, looking at it and closing it. So, it tells us something, but it doesn't tell us everything, but we can't know everything. So there we go. This is repeating. There we go. The next view is the assignment planning view, which is the one view that we've really changed quite a bit. It's a complicated view, and it's going to be complicated for me to show you without a full screen and an active demo. But here we wanted to create the opportunity for students to set some goals and to be intentional about how they're spending their time and what they were prioritizing. So what you can see is they're organized by week. They say when the due date is. They say what type it is. Canvas, when instructor puts things in Canvas, they categorize them: homework, the class participation, the various things that these are things they're getting graded on, right? And so it tells them the name of it and what % of their final grade that item is. And then if they have done it, if they've taken that quiz, it shows them their score. So at the top row, you can see this class participation for week 12. The student got 18.1 out of 20 points, okay? The next one is a homework one for 5.7% of their grade. It was an assignment. They could have gotten 50 points. They got 45. Okay. The progress bar on the top adds those up. And it says for everything you've turned in and has been graded, this is where you currently stand. The students can set a goal. Like if, remember I said, if I got to get an A, so I can't get anything lower than a 90. So I put my goal in as 90, and then the progress bar shows my goal there and shows me currently how close I am to my goal, right? And given what I've turned in so far, what's still possible given what's coming up. And then, so let's see. So you set a minimum course goal, you can see the assignment goals, and then you can filter, just show me the upcoming quizzes, or just show me the upcoming homeworks, or don't show me those participation grades. I always talk in class, I'm going to be fine. And students can scroll around. But what's hard to show here, what's hard to show here is when the student when it's coming up, they can set a goal. They can say, look, I do well on the homeworks. Typically, I always get, most of the points for the homework. So all the upcoming homeworks, I'm going to assume I'm going to perform at that same level. So I project that that's what I'm going to do. And it will calculate for them Are you meeting your goal then if you do indeed meet the projections that you put in? So like I said, participation, like I always talk in class, I always get at least 9 out of 10 points. So all the future participation grades, I'm going to give myself a 9. And so it will calculate that and help the student be strategic. So we know students do that, right? Because they don't take one class at a time. They're constantly evaluating how to spend their resources. The other thing that we changed in this based on student feedback is the color. So students now know whether it's been graded or whether it can confirm that it's been handed in, but hasn't yet been graded. Because in our old view, it just showed them graded or ungraded and students were freaking out, but I turned it in. I turned it in. How come it's not showing me what the grade was for that? Well, because the instructor hasn't graded it yet. But yes, you can rest assured the system knows you turned it in. So that was something we added to this view based on the student feedback about that. And instructors like it too, although it may ping the student to say, you know, it's 2 weeks later, you haven't submitted, I can't see my grade for that yet, but okay. So that's the assignment planning view. And the last one is the canonical. Everyone's got to have it. Every dashboard has it. Every system that has this, students click on this all the time. The grade distribution view. We did a few things here to help us understand this grade distribution view and to protect student privacy. So also based on student feedback, some students said, I don't want to see my grade on the distribution. I know what my grade is. I don't want it in my face. I want to see the distribution. And often students will say, really what I want to do from week to week or after a big assignment or after a midterm, I want to see if the distribution shifted. Because that gives the student feedback about, okay, so I got an 80% on the midterm. Is that good? Well, if you go and see the whole distribution is shifted in one direction or another, you're like, oh, if it shifted down, 80 was a good grade because everybody moved, the whole thing moved down, right? So students can toggle on or off whether they're on this view. And the other thing we did was we talked with one of our colleagues in the School of Information who does a lot about privacy. And what's the way to protect privacy in a view like this? And he recommended this binning strategy. So what that is we take the 5 lowest grades or the 5 lowest grades, no matter how many students that is, and we put them all in one bin. And you see the dotted line says less than, right? So that bin just represents, at least in this case, 5 students who have grades less than 67%. Because if you space them out, maybe there's somebody down there with the 20%. And if you're in a smaller class, everybody might go, oh gosh, I know whose grade that is. You know, they never come to class or they never say anything, or I was in a project group with them and they just really missed the boat. So it kind of clumps them. If you were a student who is in that bin, it would show you your line where you are, but it wouldn't show you how many people are above or below you in that line. It just protects the privacy of the lowest performing students. This is kind of a maybe more typical Michigan grade distribution. You can see lots of students are getting the higher grades, but also this is a point where I can note to you, while it says a grade percent, there are no grades on this. There's no A, B, C's, or D's. Because one of the things that we wanted to focus on with respect to motivation was to encourage a mastery approach and not a performance approach, right? So students can look at the syllabus and say, what does my percentage turn into in terms of grade? But we're not putting it in their face. You got an A, you got an A minus, you know, or B plus. And that also helped us in terms of scalability because much to my dismay, there are still instructors who grade on the curve at the end of the course, right? So we didn't want to be in a position of showing a student you're getting an A, and when the course is over, the instructor looks at the distribution of grades and makes a cutoff, and all of a sudden the student's like, A minus? How did I get an A minus? The dashboard told me I was getting an A. So we went with percentages, and if you remember the resources access view, that was also 90 to 100%, 80 to 90%, not students who are getting an A, students who are getting a B. So we stuck with percentages. Okay, So for this project, we have data from these various sources, but are there any questions in the audience right now? I went through those views carefully and I got a lot of data to show you, but does anyone, yeah? That's a very good question. The question for the Zoom people is, do instructors have access to this? The only view that instructors can see is the resources access view, and it only gives them the aggregate for the course. Instructor, we tell students, this is your data. Your instructor cannot go in and see where your data on the site. They can't go into this and look, did yes or no, you've read that already. That's the only part. So this is specifically and only for students. Okay, so in terms of looking at 4 terms of courses from our winter term 19 to fall 20, you say, well, who's turned it on? You can see the percentage of, so it's like who turns it on and which level course. Do freshmen turn it on? Are there more MyLA users than non-users? So we're going to talk a little bit more about what it means to be a user, but we know the class roster and we know if each student has touched MyLA. So they're a MyLA user if they've at least touched it once for this analysis right here. The non-users are the students who just ignored it. Okay, you can see that various instructors have decided to turn it on. At this point in time on our campus, it is completely voluntary. The instructor has to want to turn it on and the students have to want to use it, right? Nobody's making anybody do anything at this point. So, and here's also a distribution of courses. We use this Becker-Biglin typology. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it codes courses, hard applied, hard pure, soft applied. So like hard applied are like engineering, computer science courses, hard pure are math and econ. This was a way to kind of sort courses for the disciplinary style that they are. And you can see here that the soft pure, when you turn MyLA on in a soft pure course, which is more like a social sciences kind of course, more people use it than don't, far more people use it than don't use it. In the hard applied, it's not quite 50-50 like it is for the hard pure. And so that's just sort of at a global level, when we turn it on in these type of classes, who's more likely to use it or not. Now you're probably asking, what about those non-users? Why aren't they using it? So our survey, we send out a survey to users and non-users. And we asked them, why didn't you use it? It was turned on for your class. Why didn't you use it? You can see the top reasons. We have a publicity problem. And here it's because it's not turned on systematically across campus. And if a student doesn't pay attention to the announcement by their instructor, don't ever click and open the demo, they simply are completely clueless that MyLA exists. The other thing that we're finding out is that when instructors turn it on, often the tool comes at the bottom of the tool list. And if students don't scroll all the way to the bottom of the tool list, they don't see it there. This is pretty consistent. I pulled the data just from our most recent term. You know, everyone's back on campus and MyLA's been out for a while and these numbers just can't, so far we haven't been able to change these numbers. And then you might say, well, okay, so, but maybe it's only the good students who are using MyLA. Maybe it's the students who are already good self-regulators or already they're good students because they know how to be good students and they'll use anything you give them to be good students. But over these 4 terms, when we looked at the cumulative GPA for these students, it's the same. And you can see the cumulative GPA for Michigan average student is 3.5, but and the distribution, the standard deviation of these numbers isn't big. So it's not that only the good students who are already good students are deciding to use MyLA, and the students who are not so strong are deciding not to. I want to go back to this issue about who's a user, and this is something that we're struggling with, and I see this commonly talked about in the literature. So I worked with a wonderful group of students from one of our satellite campuses, our Dearborn campus, and they measured use by clicks. If you clicked on MyLA even once, you were a user, or days. If you clicked on MyLA at least one day in the term, you were a user. at least 1 week of the term, and then they also broke the term into quarters. Because you might say, somebody who just clicked on it once, it could have even been an accident. Are we going to call them a user? And this shows you the distribution is really the same no matter how you slice it. You've got a lot of students who don't use it a lot, and they use kind of, there are fewer students who use it a lot more. I like the days one. How many days do you use it? Because even 2 days, it might be that a student looks at it like after a midterm and right before the final. That's 2 days of the term. That looks good to me. 1 day of the term, that might be the day that the instructor reminds people it's turned on and they watch the video and that's all they did, and they never come back. So I kind of, myself, I like the days. The weeks start to get more of a consistency of use. Like if you use it more than 1 week at a time, you are coming back to it for some reason, right? Another funny thing that the Dearborn students came up with is they're like, oh, so when are students using this? This is an interesting graph if you're a system administrator, because normally when do they update systems? Like midnight to 3 a.m., right? Not the best time to update MyLA. You can see when students are checking it tends to be between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. is a peak, but they're not really there at 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. So if I was a system administrator and I was doing an upgrade, I would do it like from 8 to 10 in the morning. You're going to inconvenience the fewest users if you do that. The 3 lines represent the use of each of the views, so you can also get a sense of that, and I'll show you more data about that in a minute. So which views do students use? And so, yeah, I know I'm going to run out of time. This breaks it down for you. Which ones are they coming to most frequently? So if you're a user, what % of your use deals with the resources access view, the assignment planning view, or the grade distribution view? And you can see like every other dashboard that has a grade distribution view, that's the one most frequently used. We have this strange anomaly in the winter term of winter 21, which was our second fully online term. You can see that students somehow were not, fewer students were checking their grades then, but fall, when they returned to campus, we're back to 81% of the students are checking their grades. The COVID term, the fall 20 term, where 80% were checking their grades, I find unusual because maybe, I don't know if your campus did this, but we made students could be grade optional that first, especially that when COVID hit in the middle of that term, they're still in there checking their grades. This just shows you for each of these views kind of over when are they each module most frequently used. The blue is the assignment planning. The middle one is the grade distribution. You can see there's that frequency of use. The resources access starts early. People are checking, am I keeping up early? And then that trails off some, but then it goes up again a bit more as you come closer to the midterm. It was in the fall of 20 when that bottom line, when instructors turned on themselves. The gaps at the beginning of the term and the first 3 lines is because we had to turn it on, and we didn't usually turn it on till the 3rd, 4th, or 5th, 6th week of the term when the instructor said, okay, let's turn it on. So you can think about use by these kinds of clicks, days, weeks, whatever. But you can also say, how are students using it when they're in there using it? And this is from a paper you can go back and look at. That was at the Learning Analytics Conference in 20. A student working with me was analyzing like sequences, right? And so here, these are the top 10 sequences of use. And you can see the top 3 are just going in there and clicking on one thing. So the parentheses with 1 letter means, so the first one is grade. They went in there, they clicked on grade, they left. Or they went in there, they clicked on the files access, the resource access, and they left, or the assignment. The 4th one is they went and looked at files, and in the same time period, looked at files again. So they left MyLA for a minute or so, and then came back and checked files again. And you can see, so when there's a space between the parentheses, that's when they went back and came back at a later time. The one that's next to it, FFF, all in the same parentheses, means they checked a file, went and looked at the file, came back, checked for a file, went and looked at the file, checked at the file, went back and looked at the file, which turns out to be a common pattern. And you can see some of these other ones, they start at the assignment page and then they check their grade. They start at the files page and then they check their grade. Or they check their grade and they go away for a while, come back and look at a file. Or they check their grade, go away and come back and check the assignments view. So these are the top 10 sequences of use. If you're asking what they're doing. Now, it's very difficult to assess the impact of use, right? Because there are a lot of things going on, and I'm never going to stand up in front of an audience and say, using MyLA means your grade will improve by X. But of course, everyone's curious. Are there differences between the students' grades outcome in these courses and whether they're users or not? So I use that at least 2 days in a term, or less than 2 days. And we have an N that's big enough that this is statistically significant. Whether a student would be convinced that a difference is close to 1% of their grade or not, I don't know. But if you go up and say the students who use it 4 or more weeks of the term, the difference is 1.3, which, maybe it is the difference between an A and an A minus, or an A minus and a B plus. So, use at your own peril, I think, but I think it's interesting to look at outcomes that way. Or you could look at outcomes by pattern. So this is, again, that view of those top 10 patterns. And in this paper, we correlated it with their course outcome. And all of the patterns were significant, at least 0.05, and a number of them at 0.1, or 0.01, and several at 0.001. Just checking your grades, checking grades and leaving, which you can see most people do. Remember, that had no impact on grade, interestingly. You start when they're doing this file thing, am I keeping up? And then they go look at the file and come back. Many of those sequences are related to correlated with a higher course grade. And I'll be clear about correlations, not causation. Okay. One thing people want to know, sometimes instructors don't want us to turn on that grade distribution view. So we started adding to our survey questions about each view, and did it make them feel more or less anxious or disappointed? And here's how the data looks for this. You want to pay attention to the blue lines. This is where it's the survey answer is not at all. So the percent of students who said looking at the assignment planning view, the resources access view, and the grade distribution view, the highest lines are all blue, not at all. And then the somewhat, a little bit, or a lot, that goes down from there. But you can see, yes, some students are anxious from looking at these views. Few of them are very anxious. What I think is interesting is to ask ourselves, maybe being a little anxious is good. Maybe that's motivating. I don't know. But we also have positive emotions. Was it making students happy or relieved or hopeful? And there you see the patterns very different. Sure, the blue lines, there's still a number of students are saying, yeah, it doesn't matter, didn't do anything for me at all. But the gray line is the somewhat, and you can see here that, so more students are reporting those 3 categories of, yeah, maybe it did make me feel a little more hopeful or a little more relieved as a consequence of having seen those views. So, and there was a recent paper by Mark Washer at University of California, Irvine, who found that student-facing analytics about one's effort compared to relevant peers encourage students to attribute their failures to effort instead of ability. So I'm really curious about whether seeing this doesn't lead to students to say, oh, that was just hard, but rather to say, I need to work harder. I need to try more. I need to study more or read more. And I'm going to have to just blast through these, but again, the blue line is not at all. The middle line is somewhat, the gray is very. So was using MyLA worth my time and effort? Very few students said not at all. Using it was valuable for my performance. Again, somewhat. Most students are somewhat, and very. You see the grade distribution there in the end. How many students said seeing my grade was very valuable for my performance? or improved my performance. So students are by and large are saying that using this tool is providing some benefit to them. We also asked at the end of fall and winter term, our 2 fully online remote COVID terms, whether using it was more or less helpful to them. And we got a 50-50 split on that one. No difference, didn't matter, but at least not quite half the students said, yeah, it was more useful in a remote. So where I am here is we've got a lot more questions, and I bet you have questions too. And so I'm going to make sure that we can do that. But what we want to do, there's many more things that we want to do with this research. And I'll throw out again the invitation to do some cross-institutional one. I don't know if any of the faculty who are using MyLA are out there watching us today, but we can make some of our survey instruments available if you want to, if we want to compare apples to apples. I think Michigan students are not a typical undergrad population. That's very, admissions to Michigan is highly competitive. I know Minnesota is also a very good school, but I'm hoping to have a broader range of demographics. So really get a better sense of students who are truly struggling, right? First generation students, underrepresented minorities, and other students who are struggling. Do they get a bigger bang for the buck out of using this? I would really like to know. Okay, so I am going to stop there and show you some resources. There are places you can go to, and I can make this available to you later. And I have to give thanks to the people who helped me prepare the slides for this presentation. My wonderful now Dr. Fatima Seleniakia. Jennifer Love is the ITS person, and there's those 3 Dearborn students who did a heroic effort putting a ton of data together. And the project team, you can see how many people have been involved over the years that we've been working on it. And I couldn't do this project without them. So I want to recognize their hard work and input as well. Thank you. Okay, I know, sorry. Once I get going, it was fun.
Yeah, there's water if you want to. Yeah, we have some questions. I know. I know. I still see a few questions in the chat. I wonder
Great.
whether colleagues want to unmute themselves and ask the question directly to Dr.
Oh, that would be
Teasley.
good. Yeah.
Then
Everyone could hear them.
So anyone? Or
Or
anyone
maybe
from
call-
the audience too?
Or maybe call on someone if they want to jump in.
What's that? Can you see that?
Peg?
Peg?
Someone named Peg?
Yeah, Peg, do you want to ask a question?
Hi, I
Okay.
forget, was it me this time?
Me,
I'm not sure
yes.
which question I asked. Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Peg.
So for starters, hello again. Thanks for everyone. This is a wonderful presentation. I can't remember which question I asked first, but I know there was some information about signals that you had mentioned, and I just wanted to kind of give some praise out there to John Campbell, who just was heroic and I think an early leader in this area. So
Absolutely.
and I'm actually scanning the chat right now because I don't even remember what I may have written in there, but I had my clapping up to give you a presentation. So
Oh, that's nice.
I'll let others move forward. Sorry to interrupt you. Okay.
Okay, no.
I see Amanda Evans has posted some questions. So if you want to ask the question directly, feel free.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hi, Amanda.
Hi. I had posted, curious if you found cases where students are not always wanting to know how they're doing in comparison to others, along with what students are reporting is helpful and what they're learning regarding what kinds of information support student success.
Yeah, that I would love to be able to answer that question with some more precise numbers, which I hope to be able to do, especially now that we've got the data sets combined in a way that we can identify students. One of the things that I have a conjecture about, especially regarding gateway courses, is I'm wondering whether showing students this data might be a way to counteract stereotype threat. So in other words, we know that in some of these STEM gateway courses, when women students aren't doing well, they attribute it to maybe I'm just not good at this, right? And I think by getting this information, it helps the student calibrate and say, well, wait a minute, I'm not the only one who only got a 75 on this. Other people did, and look how many other people got a lower grade than me. So one analysis that we're working on at Michigan, and the Center for Academic Innovation is doing this really interesting work where they're creating what they call a score for a student that they call the barrier score. So they take demographic data like the student, whether the student's a Pell Grant student or not, whether they're English first language or not, whether a first gen student, and for some courses, whether they're female or not, kind of give them a point for each of those. So someone who's got a 4 has a lot of barriers, right? And someone who has a 0 doesn't. And so they're looking at where courses, identifying students who have more and more variables, and are they getting lower grades? And I think that we can combine some of that analysis with the MyLA use to sort of start to see whether we're helping students who have a lot of potential barriers to success. Are we supporting those students, in a way that's helpful to them, as opposed to just, as I said, students who are already good students? Does that come close to answering your question as best I can right now, Amanda?
Yeah, and it also relates to the second question that I had asked about, are there patterns of which students find it more useful, first generation students or other demographic breakdowns? So that also addresses that, and it's
Yeah,
very,
I really
very
want to know
interesting.
that. Yep, thank you. I agree with you. That's a really important thing to know. But I don't have an answer today.
Thank you.
Sure. Who else has got something? I don't. Yeah, sure. In the room. Yes.
I really like how you were breaking down a bit by the Canvas courses, the uses, non-uses, percentage. But in terms of that sort of extrinsically imposed, like categorization of those courses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Subject, something, but were you able to break down how those courses were designed to get this? And then looking at uses versus non-uses?
And so by design, what would you be looking for?
Canvas usage, business support that uses a lot of discussion, forums, module usage in Canvas, sometimes they all of these.
Yep. So to do that analysis at scale, we would have to figure out how to identify those factors from the log data, right? Which possibly could be done. Otherwise, what you would have to do is go course by course and look at the syllabus or whatever. And, you could do a deep dive into that. You could select some specific courses and then go look at their syllabi and the data for those courses to answer that question, which I think would be another way to do it, as sort of more case-based rather than across the board. So I think that would be fascinating. And I would love to have someone who's interested in doing it either way. But yes, I'm limited by capacity, right? I only have so many people on this project, and there's so many good questions like that. So happy to dig into that with someone who's interested. Anyone else? No. Now we're at 11:15. Oh, okay, but not everyone's probably committed to being on Zoom till 11:30. Anybody out there in Zoom land who has to go, who wants to unmute themselves and ask a question while you're still here and I'm still here? I went through a lot of information quickly, sorry. Peg, you're there? Yeah.
I've got one more. My colleague, Stephen Hawks, he works with our APHIS program here at the university, and I try to assist with the health sciences aspect of that. But anyhow, he has a question and his microphone's not working, so he asked me to ask for him.
Oh, very
Okay,
nice.
so yeah, so it's in the chat though, but he says he knows Canvas isn't always the most friendly for the learning outcomes assessment, which I do know CEHD has been, they're like our leaders for that on campus. But anyway, he's wondering if you've looked at incorporating any other learning outcomes achievements from Canvas courses or from other systems. And he's wondering if MyLA can visualize the learning outcomes achievement within a course, across multiple courses, across all of their courses, for students to view their own achievement and distribution for comparisons.
Right. I guess, I'm sorry, his microphone isn't working. Maybe he can clarify in chat. So I'm not quite sure. I want him to explain to me what he means by learning outcomes achievement. Do you mean when a course has identified learning goals, right? Yeah, I think, yeah, other people.
I think it's a Canvas module that set up that says this first course is up. I think they're all 50.
Yes, yes, we know that Canvas has modules, and when we started this project, very few faculty on our campus were using Canvas that way. As Canvas users have gotten more sophisticated, we're finding more and more faculty turn to that model. And in fact, we have gotten student feedback that said, rather than showing me this data week by week, show me everything organized by module. And we would love to be able to do that. We don't have the development effort to rejigger that. But it's definitely something that we've been asked for and that we've thought about and would be interested in doing, Stephen, because it would allow us to do this assessment that you're suggesting would be a different, very different way to look at the potential impact of MyLA. So that's a stay tuned, or find somebody at Minnesota who's willing to work with our developers to come up with that. My data visualization person is, he's left Michigan, he's at Northwestern, but he's still very interested in helping. We want to get that view right though, right? We want it to be created in a way that's really easy for students to understand and interpret. That was our goal for all these views. Our accessibility measures and usability measures, when we have those items in our survey, they're so high in terms of people saying no problem, that I didn't even present the data here. So yeah, I'd love to have a modules view. That'd be great. Anyone else? There, Bodong, you asked what roles instructors may play to support student use of MyLA. Oh, please tell your students you turned it on. Please remind them that you turned it on. Please make sure the demo, because it's a video demo of how to use it, please make sure that's up and clear and easily available on your site. And don't bury the tool at the bottom of the toolbar, right? Remind them early and often that, that it's turned on. We've sent some emails to students during the term, everyone who's on a course roster where MyLA's turned on. We often find a little uptake in MyLA use after that. But still, as you saw from our research data, some are like, I don't know. It's not because they can't figure it out or they thought it was too hard. And very few students say, I didn't turn it on because I didn't think it was useful. So it's, what can we do? We have to enlist instructors to have a little bit more use MyLA. But maybe showing them more and more data will help also enlist them. Anything else? No?
About time.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for the wonderful questions. I think it's about time and a really fascinating project. You know, it's great to see start from the institutional context, introduce and design and all kinds of research your team has conducted on
Thank
this
you.
project. So
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah,
Yay.
it's
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
yeah, thank you so
Yep.
much, Dr. Teasley, and thank you